Welcome, cartel members, to this breaking news on Thursday morning, 6:16 a.m. Now, we knew this was coming. We just knew it was coming. Let's get into this story. In Canada, another horrific discovery of Indigenous children's remains. Regina, Saskatchewan. A Canadian Indigenous group on Wednesday announced the horrific and shocking discovery of the remains of hundreds of children at the site of a former school in the province of Saskatchewan, however you say that. The largest such discovery to date. It came weeks after the remains of 215 children were found in unmarked graves on the grounds of another former boarding school in British Columbia. Both schools were part of a system that took Indigenous children in the country from their families, sometimes by force, and housed them in boarding schools. Sounds kind of like CPS, right? Sounds kind of like foster care. A National Truth and Reconciliation Commission called the practice cultural genocide. Many children never returned home, and their families were given only vague explanations of their fates or none at all. In a statement, the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations said that the latest remains numbered in the hundreds and were the most significantly substantial to date in Canada. It did not give an exact figure. The discovery was made by the Coesis First Nation at the Maryville Indian Residential School, about 87 miles from the provincial capital, Regina. The Federation's chief, Bobby Cameron, said that the group planned a formal announcement Thursday. There was always talk and speculation and stories, but to see this number, it's a pretty significant number, Cameron said. It's going to be difficult and painful and heartbreaking. The latest findings are likely to deepen the nation's debate over its history of exploiting Indigenous people. The discoveries will refocus attention on the horrors of the schools where sexual, physical, and emotional abuse were common, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission found. When Justin Trudeau took office as a prime minister in 2015, he placed taking up the Commission's 94 recommendations as his top priority, but progress has been slow, in part because some of them are beyond the federal government's control. Cameron and several other Indigenous leaders say they hope the discovery of the children's remains will accelerate the process. The investigations into the fate of the missing children are vindication for Canada's Indigenous people whose oral histories suggest that thousands of children had disappeared from the schools had often been met with skepticism. There's no denying this. All of the stories told by our survivors are true, Cameron said. This is what the Catholic Church in Canada and the Government of Canada of the day forced on our children. Now, it is unclear how many children were sent to the schools never to return home. Disease, including the Spanish flu outbreak a century ago, often swept through the overcrowded schools' dormitories. Some children died from exposure after escaping, and testimony by former students to the commission included accounts of the incineration of bodies of infants born to girls who had been impregnated by priests and monks. Oh my God. The commission estimated that about 41,000 children vanished, but an Indigenous former judge who led the panel said in an email earlier this month that he now believed the number was well beyond 10,000. The remains of 215 children were discovered at the Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia through the use of ground-penetrating radar, much like an MRI scan. The technology produces images of anomalies in the soil. An official of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations said the latest analysis, which relied on the same technology, began about 3 weeks ago, not long after the announcement of preliminary findings about the Kamloops School by First Nation. The search at the Kamloops School is still continuing, and the First Nation leaders say they expected a final report would increase the number of graves found. When the commission attempted to look into the question of missing Indigenous children, the Conservative government at the time turned down its request for money to finance searches. Now, several federal governments have offered to fund searches after the Kamloops discovery. On Tuesday, the government announced that it would provide just under 4.9 million Canadian dollars to Indigenous communities in Saskatchewan to search for graves. The provincial government previously committed 2 million Canadian dollars. In a statement, Scott Moe, Premier of Saskatchewan predicted that remains of more children would be found elsewhere. Sadly, other Saskatchewan First Nations will experience the same shock and despair as the search for graves continues, he wrote. Like Kamloops, the Mary Eval School, which opened in 1899, was operated for most of its history by the Roman Catholic Church for the Government of Canada. A marked cemetery still exists on the grounds of the school, which closed in 1997 and was subsequently demolished. The commission, relying on testimony from former students and archival materials, listed the Mary Eval School as a likely site for unmarked graves. The commission called for a papal apology for the role of the church, which operated about 70% of the schools. The rest were run by Protestant denominations, but despite a personal appeal from Trudeau to the Vatican, Pope Francis has still not taken that step. By contrast, the leadership of the United Church of Canada, the country's largest Protestant denomination, apologized for its role in running schools in 1986. Former students of the Saskatchewan residential schools were particularly active in litigation against the government, resulting in financial settlements and the establishment of the commission, which heard testimony from more than 6,700 witnesses over 6 years. Jesus. Since the Kamloops announcement, Cameron said he has been traveling around the province where farming and mining are major industries, looking at former school sites. You can see with your plain eye of the indent of the ground where these bodies are to be found, he said of some locations. These children are sitting there waiting to be found. Now, we're going to jump to the next story here. February 1st, 2016, over 50,000 Native children were tortured, sexually abused, and some murdered at Canadian church-run Indian residential schools by Damon Corey. This is by Damon Corey. And the Queen of England was found culpable for the disappearance of 10 Native children. She took herself in person and were never seen again. Don't think it was only pedophile priests and nuns that have the blood of Native children on their hands. The royal bloodlines, the greatest parasites of humanity, and not the benevolent souls that they appear to be to their fans who idolize them, share this guilt as well. It sounds like some absurd claim to many who do not relentlessly trace the ancestries of European royal families, but in my own research I have found some very interesting facts. And one that I found personally was the royal hunting parties that they all seem to have participated in. Namely, that all European royal families can trace back via at least one ancestor / ancestress to a member of the imperial bloodline of the Roman Empire. And the Roman emperors can trace back via at least one ancestor to the royal bloodline of the Egyptian dynasties, who in turn can trace back via at least one ancestor to the Babylonian royal bloodlines, who were the first royals to claim a divine right to rule over mankind was bestowed unto them from supernatural entities they called gods, and also the figure to engage in ritualistic child sex and sacrifice children to these gods in dark rituals. Since the Babylonians, many other kings and emperors around the world have copied them and claimed divine right in their own countries. Though these other royals did not adopt the child sacrifice and ritualistic pedophilia aspects of the Babylonians, perhaps the very self-evident preoccupation of the persons of this ilk to want to religiously preserve their bloodline, sometimes slipping into the realm of genetic paranoia, might offer a logical scientific explanation as to their inherited psychosis that has left them the victims of this mental flaw due to several millennia of genetic inbreeding. For all we know, that inbreeding creates genetic flaws that only become more acute over time if the practice is continued. Hemophilia was considered a royal disease precisely due to genetic inbreeding among the royals of Europe, truly and utterly convinced that they really do have some divine right to rule other human beings, and who knows what other mentally imbalanced rites and rituals may ensue among those with such an intergenerational state of psychosis. Most people only know a few royals from the benevolent public image they show to the world, but I have never met anyone beneath their status who was privy to their private conversations due to serving them in some way that allows for close contact in their own palatial homes, who did not say that they speak of the rest of non-royal humanity as cattle fit only to be driven, useless eaters that need to be culled, loathsome commoners, irritating peasants, etc. A decidedly more malevolent view of us by most of them in their honest opinions. They never have and never will see the rest of us as their equals, no matter how many babies they kiss or charities they endorse or glowing public speeches they give. Is there some additional esoteric importance to the mitochondrial DNA that they have been so successful at carefully preserving for thousands of years? Some dark aspect to it known to the bearers? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing is fairly obvious. The royals are all in a nutshell the most cunningly clever of all parasites to have ever fed off humanity for a living. And they will never change, any more than a leopard can change its own spots at will. This may come as a shock to you, but the Queen and Prince Philip took orphan native children in Canada on picnics, and they were never returned to the orphanages or ever seen again. What the hell did she do with them? Release them into the woods somewhere? I think not. Surely you have heard of Jimmy Savile, close friend of the royal family of the UK, who it was revealed after his death that he was the supplier of children to the highest of high society, pedophile rings in the UK, with prime ministers, judges, police and military top brass, high-ranking clergy, and yes, members of the royal family and British aristocracy all involved. Learn about the great pedophile demigod Jimmy Savile here in the investigative documentary made about him. And there's the YouTube video there. If you are a Christian, you should remember the warning in your Bible that says this world is ruled by the powers and principalities of darkness in high places. You remember that quote all your life. And I do believe that there are some evil people that rule the world in high places. Not evil. I don't believe the devil controls them, of course, but I believe that there is an aspect that us humans see as evil and see as good, so I don't deny that, their theory. But in the second week of May 2014, British soldier Vivian Cunningham was drugged and institutionalized against his will. Apparently, his crime on May 6th was daring to ask superiors about Queen Elizabeth's outstanding arrest warrant concerning the 10 missing Canadian native children that disappeared in her company. The Queen is untouchable because of the powers that be that protect her and share in her esoteric activities. The order to arrest Judge Elizabeth was issued in 2013 by 6 judges of the International Common Law Court of Justice in Brussels. And I actually heard they arrested her. They handcuffed her, and then the Royal Guard swooped in and said, But that was all, of course, rumor. But after nearly a year of litigation, Queen Elizabeth and her husband, Prince Philip, were found guilty in the disappearance of 10 native children from the Catholic-run Kamloops residential school in British Columbia. Remember that name? Grieving parents haven't seen their children since they left for a picnic with the royal couple on October 10, 1964. Conveniently, the last native eyewitnesses in Canada died just before they could give evidence in court against the Queen and Prince Philip. The Aboriginal man who claimed to witness the abduction of 10 fellow residential school children by the Queen of England and her husband in October 1964 at the Catholic school in Kamloops, British Columbia, has died suddenly at the Catholic-run St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver. William Combs, age 59 and in good health, was scheduled to be a primary witness at the opening session of the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State on September 12th in London, England. I last saw William 10 days ago on the eve of my departure for a European speaking tour, and he looked better than I had seen him in years, according to his partner May. William was in stable health and was assigned a new doctor at St. Paul's Hospital this week. William was then committed to the hospital for tests, and his health began to immediately deteriorate. He died suddenly yesterday of a still undisclosed cause. The Vancouver's coroner's office refuses to comment on William's death. William was the sole survivor of a group of 3 Aboriginal boys who claimed to have witnessed the abduction of 10 children during a royal visit to the Kamloops residential school in mid-October 1964, when both the Queen and Prince Philip were in Canada. They took away those 10 kids and nobody ever saw them again, described William in several public statements that made over the airwaves of my former Vancouver co-op radio program, and in the following signed and witnessed declaration made on February 3rd, 2010. Here is the testimony he gave before he died. I am an interior Salish spirit dancer and am 58 years old. I live in Vancouver, Canada. I am a survivor of the Kamloops and Mission India residential schools, both run by the Roman Catholic Church. I suffered terrible tortures there at the hands, especially of Brother Murphy, who killed at least 2 children. I witnessed him throw a child off a 3-story balcony to her death. He put me on a rack and broke some of my bones in the Kamloops school basement after I tried running away. I also saw him and another priest burying a child in the school orchard one night. What the hell? In October 1964, when I was 12 years old, I was an inmate at the Kamloops school, and we were visited by the Queen of England and Prince Philip. I remember it was strange because they came by themselves, no big fanfare or nothing. But I recognized them, and the school principal told us it was the Queen, and we all got given new clothes and good food for the first time in months the day before she arrived. The day the Queen got to the school, I was part of a group of kids that went on a picnic with her and her husband, and some of the priests down to a meadow near Dead Man's Creek. I remember it was weird because we all had to bend down and kiss her foot, a white laced boot. After a while, I saw the Queen leave the picnic with 10 children from the school, and those kids never returned. We never heard anything more about them and never met them again. And when we were older, they were all from met them again even when we were older. They were all from around there, but they all vanished. The group that disappeared was 7 boys and 3 girls in age from 6 to 14 years old. They were all from the smart group in class. 2 of the boys were brothers, and they were Metis from Quesnel. Their last Arnold. I don't remember the others. Just an occasional first name like Cecilia, and there was an Edward. What happened was also witnessed by my friend George Adolph, who was 11 years old at the time and a student there too, but he's dead now. See all the evidence on this website. So I'm going to stop there if you want to check it out. There's not much left, but there is some links and stuff, so check it out. I'm going to try to put a link down in the comment section below. So check the comment section, and if you're not commenting, I don't know what you're doing. You're missing out on all the good fun. Be sure to comment down below. Hit the like button if you don't, please. It really does help my channel. So if you don't, you're kind of being a hater. Gotta say it. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Again, being a hater if you're watching and not subscribed. Just my opinion. Share this video, hit the bell for notifications, and please check the description down below. I have a tip jar down there, 3 tip jars to be exact, a PayPal, a Cash App, and a Venmo. If you appreciate my efforts in getting you this information, please consider donating any and all dollars you may have extra that are lying around, especially if they're digital. So with that said, that's all I have for you guys. You guys know the routine. As always, to God be the glory.